Hello everybody, and welcome to this session in the Pig Forum. We're going to tackle the subject of animal health and welfare in this session. Obviously a huge subject with many ramifications. This is a brief session, so we won't pretend we're going to cover every subject of interest, and we'll be brief. But I should say at this stage all the speakers will be available on the AHDB stand after this session if you've got any questions or anything you want to follow up with them. As I say, we're not going to cover everything, but we are going to pick out on some, we hope, interesting subjects which will be of interest to you. The pig sector, as you know, I think we will all agree, can hold its head high when it comes to its performance in the reduction in antibiotic usage across all pig farms. But there's more work to be done, and we'll hear a bit about that. Endemic disease, we know, is a massive barrier to progress for all pig producers, and we'll hear more and more in the next year or two about the pig health and welfare pathway, and we'll be talking about endemic disease and approaches to managing it. Farrowing systems are going to be a huge subject over the next few years, the choices that producers will need to make and the challenges wrapped up in that. And we'll be hearing a bit about what the state of play is just now. And then, of course, we need to demonstrate to the public that we know what we're doing when it comes to animal health and welfare. And you'll be aware of the launch of the welfare training that all people involved in caring for pigs on UK farms are carrying out now and over the next few months. And we'll hear a bit about that. Quite a packed agenda, so without further ado, I'll hand over to Mandy Neville from AHDB.
Thanks very much, Mike, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Mike said, I'm Mandy Neville, and I'm delighted to head up the Animal Health and Welfare team at AHDB. We live in an era when we're bombarded with information. Information comes at us from all different directions, and it can be quite difficult to work out what we need to do with that data, with that information, and how we make best use of it. And actually, in the Animal Health and Welfare team, we're no different. I try and categorise our work into three main areas: those of disease prevention, welfare and young stock work, and then medicines. And the one thing they've all got in common is they're linked together by data, and data is increasing. And knowing and understanding what we do with data and how we can use it to inform practice on farm is absolutely key to ensuring production efficiency. So many of you will have seen this little scheme before, but with data it can sometimes be quite difficult to work out what's going on. So if I asked you to spend the next 30 seconds trying to count from 1 to 99 in this mess of numbers, I wonder how far you would get. So just try and count 1 to 99. And it's quite difficult. And I'm sure you can all count 1 to 99. I don't need to teach you how to do that. But actually, even some of those intelligent people in this audience are struggling to count to 99. But if I put a bit of structure around that and show you that in the top left-hand corner is number 1, and then the next middle top is number 2, and so on, within about a few minutes, you could probably count to 99. And that's how I try and liken what we do with our data at AHDB to this. We try and put structure around it to make it easier for producers to interpret and to use on farm. But there's one thing for sure with data: if you want to get the most out of it, you need to have data in the first place. And as Lord Kelvin says, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So the first part is about getting the data in a good format and actually just recording data, because if you don't, you can't do anything with it. But equally, it's not just about recording it, it's about looking at it as well. Because if you don't look at your data and you don't know how to interpret it, again, you can't do anything with it. So there's no point me just getting on the scales every morning on my weight loss program, looking at how much I weigh, if I'm not going to do anything, if I'm not going to make any changes to my diet. I'm not going to lose weight. Doesn't matter how much I get on the scales, how much I record it, I've got to actually put that into change. So that's what I'm I'm really appealing to. That's my call to action today, is to collect your data, make sure it's meaningful, and to look at it, interpret it. As I said at AHDB, we have a huge amount of data with all our schemes, and they're all linked together through the Pig Hub, the central hub of that data collection. I wouldn't have time in this 5 or 10 minutes to talk to you about all the things that we do. So I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about the electronic medicines book, which records antibiotics and medicine usage, and the pig health scheme data, which is our abattoir surveillance scheme. We have guides on how to interpret the data that you get on your reports if you're a farmer. If you haven't signed up to either of these schemes, please see me at the end and I can take you across and we can join you up, because actually you need to get access to your reports and you need to know how to put the data in. So these are really easy guidelines of how to interpret your reports, and I'm just going to go through some highlights of those. I'll start with the pig health scheme. So every pig that is monitored at the abattoir on the pig health scheme, we look for signs of enzootic pneumonia-like lesions. So this is a pneumonia of pigs that's very commonplace. And what we do is we average that up and we'll give you reports throughout the year. And looking at the trends that you get throughout the year, you can see whether your enzootic pneumonia-like lesions in the pigs that you've sent to slaughter are increasing or decreasing. You can interpret that with your vet. You could, for example, put in a vaccination program and you could monitor the impacts of that. So because we have a national recording system, the green at the bottom are the pigs, the lowest percentage of enzootic pneumonia units, and that would be a low prevalence of disease. Amber would indicate that you've got a moderate level of disease compared with the national herd, and red would indicate that you've actually got a high prevalence of disease. So knowing where you are in comparison to the rest of the national herd is really important, because it actually gives you a trigger of when you need to start doing something urgently. So measuring that, looking at that with your vet, really important over the years. Now, the pig health scheme, as we know, didn't occur during COVID. We weren't allowed into the abattoir, so there has been a break. But I'm delighted to say that the pig health scheme is now back up and running in 7 of the 11 abattoirs, with the remaining 4 coming online. I think 1 came online last week, and the remaining 3 will be online for Q3 this year. So we'll be back up to 100% of assessments in Q3 of this year. So if you haven't seen your reports, please start looking for them, because they will be coming back. We don't just look for enzootic pneumonia-like lesions, we look for a whole host of other things, such as pleurisy or pleuritis as well, and that can give you an indication of disease on your farm. And for those of you that might not be familiar with what pig lungs look like in the abattoir, I thought to just put a couple of pictures up here. So this is a picture of a pig's lung that's nice and clean. There's no disease on this lung. So the pig's head would be at the top. The white sort of tube going down the middle is the windpipe or the trachea, and then you've got these lobes of the lungs that spread out into the chest, into the rib cage of the pig. And that's a nice healthy set of lungs from a pig. This one on the right, you can see in the lobes towards the top of the picture, they're much darker. Those are areas of what we call consolidation, which is where the lung has collapsed. So instead of being nice and spongy, it actually feels much more like liver. And that is what we typically associate with enzootic pneumonia. Now, enzootic pneumonia doesn't usually kill your pigs, but what it will do is it will reduce their productivity, their efficiency of production. So not only is the pig investing energy into healing those tissues that have been damaged by the bacteria, but it also reduces food conversion efficiency. The pigs have a higher respiratory rate, so they're spending more energy doing that. So you'll get an unevenness in growth rate rather than pigs dying. But actually, too many people, I believe, just live with that rather than addressing it. And knowing what's going on your farm can be so important into making changes. So do look out for that in your pig health scheme reports. Another picture of obviously a different pig on the left with enzootic pneumonia, again, just affecting those lobes at the top, so not too severe. But this picture on the right shows a lesion or some pathology in the largest lung lobes of the pig. So this is going to impact on the breathing of the animal much more than the enzootic pneumonia would do. And if you look at that dark centre of the left-hand side of that picture, you'll see a whiter area, which is actually inflammation of the surface of that lung. And when this lung was removed from the pig, that was actually a tag of inflammatory tissue that was stuck to the wall of the rib cage. So every time this pig was breathing, that would be tearing. And that's incredibly painful. And that is pleurisy or pleuritis. So these are two of the most common things that we see in the abattoirs and that will be recorded on your pig health scheme report. So do look out for those. This is a pig that didn't make it to the abattoir, and so what you'll see at the top left of the picture is where the pig's head would be. You can see the white line down sort of going diagonally, which is actually the spinal cord, so you're looking into the rib cage of this pig, and the lungs have been reflected back. And what you can see towards the bottom middle is where the lung is actually stuck to the wall of the rib cage. And the other thing that you'll notice in here is that there's a lot of fluid in here. And that's just part of the process of pneumonia. And this pig died from respiratory disease. So you've got two ends of the extreme. You've got completely clear lungs, which are not all that common in the abattoir, through to a dead pig. And so knowing where you sit on that scale is increasingly important, is very important. I'm now just going to move quickly on to the electronic medicine book for pigs. And those of you that enter your data on the EMB will be familiar with the reports. So each time you go on, you can get your data. You will have a figure, so the purple bar will indicate where your usage is and how you compare with the average for your production type. So whether you're a breeder finisher or just a grower finisher, you'll be compared with those types of units, not across the entire category. So it gives you a little bit more ability to work out how you compare with the others. If you're moving over towards the right-hand side of the graph, obviously your usage is going to be higher. And if you're in the top 5% of users for antibiotics in your category over the last 12 months, you will get a red box on your report, and you can just see this at the top of the screen, and it just says you are in the top 5% of users. And I would really urge those of you that get that on your report to start looking at, you need to start looking at why you're using antibiotics. And combining that with the pig health scheme data can give you a lot more insight into what's going on your farm and why and when you're using antibiotics. We do a lot of research, and one of the research programs that I've been working with SRUC is trying to identify the main risk factors associated with high antibiotic use in pigs. And sure enough, the reports aren't final yet. We haven't finalised the report, but some of the conclusions that not really any surprises, but enzootic pneumonia is probably the most important factor in terms of antibiotic use on farms. So if you've got enzootic pneumonia, looking at that from your pig health scheme reports and comparing it with your antibiotic use data, really important. And obviously monitoring those disease levels both on your farm and at slaughter is important. What I've spoken about today is really how levy payers on farm, how farmers can look at the data on the farm, but the other point that I wanted to make that's so important about national collation of data is that as an industry, if we know what we're using as an industry on a national scale in terms of antibiotics, we can really defend our products on both the domestic and international markets. So we've had some really good news stories in antibiotic use where we've been able to demonstrate what we've been using. Before 2016, when we started recording antibiotic use, we didn't know what we were using. So that's really important for farm level, but also international and domestic market level. Thanks very much for your attention.
My name is Beat Thoman from the GBATS program, and I'm happy to talk to you today and present the Global Burden of Animal Disease program and more specifically the UK case study that we conduct for the estimation of disease burden in UK pork production. First, I would like to acknowledge the people we are working with. Some of them are also here from AHDB, Carol, Derek, Jen, Andy, and Matthew, and all the others. So, when you look at the value of global farmed animals in crop production, you can see that livestock production makes up a little bit more than half of the value. So it's about a bit more than $2 trillion a year. And within the livestock production itself, you can see that pigs and chicken, they share second and third place after the biggest share, which are from the cattle. And this shows the importance of livestock production and also the importance of animal health and disease control. So when you look at the right side of this graph and you see the realized production level, and then you go to the middle and you see the hypothetical production level which would be possible if we would not have disease, if our animals would not have disease. And the red thing in between is the disease burden, which is made up by reduced growth rates, reduced performance itself, mortality, culls and condemns. So we are trying to estimate this burden of disease, and the aim is not that we would add a higher, that we would use this improved performance without disease to generate more output, but rather to produce the same output with lower input, so more efficient and sustainable production with lower disease occurs. This burden of disease we are trying to estimate with the animal health loss envelope, where on the population level we compare the healthy animals or the healthy population, which is actually the current health status, but we know there is some disease attached, and we compare this with the ideal health status where there is no disease occurrence. And we take the normal farm budgets like output in a species independent approaches, output can be eggs, wool, milk or meat. Then we have the variable costs such as cost for veterinary, cost for replacement and mainly for feed. And we have the fixed cost, which is mainly infrastructure. We compare these two scenarios and we look at the difference, which would then be the animal health loss envelope, made up by production losses and additional expenditures caused by disease. And later we can attribute the AHLE into diseases or disease complexes and so on. So we have within the global burden of animal diseases, we have global question that you can ask for any species, like what's the biomass of your livestock, because if you want to compare different populations you need a common denominator. Or you can ask how much does the poultry sector spend on veterinary products. You can ask the same question for cattle, or in this case here of course for pork production. So all these questions we're trying to address and give some answers. So these things were the global approach that we have, like a theoretical framework that we try to apply to different diseases and different species and different regions. And then we have different case studies going on in different countries and species across the world to try to answer questions and give information for better decision making and better resource allocation. So one of the case study that we just recently started is the disease burden estimation for the UK pork production, and the specific objectives are first to map the different production systems that we have here, then the biomass and capital investment estimation, what levels of inputs and outputs we have in each system or system type, and then finally the estimation of the animal health loss envelope. So we just started with the case study in the UK, and we want to generate information which helps, as I said before, to improve the investments that we do in animal health, and at the end from the farmer side to improve their margin, that they put the money at the correct place. and to improve information and closing data gaps. So one of the diseases which will be part of the animal health loss envelope is, of course, PRRS. As we all know, PRRS is an economically very important disease worldwide in pork production systems. Also in the UK, we have it's endemic, and we have the majority of the farms are affected by PRRS, and the same picture we have in other European countries and also other worldwide production systems. So we previously developed a farm level model to estimate the cost of PRRS. So in this case that I show here, it was for Germany, but you can adapt this for different production systems in different countries and make detailed estimates based on your inputs. So this example here is a farrow to finish farm in Germany with 1,000 working sows, which was not affected yet by PRRS and also did not have any intervention strategies, so no vaccination yet. It then was infected by field virus in all production parts, so that means breeding, nursery and finishing, and also the respiratory components and the reproductive components of the disease. The model works the classical way. You have the negative farm production parameters and then the production parameters for the infected farm with the disease effects. So for example, a higher abortion rate or more days in nursery, more days in fattening, a lower weight at weaning, and all the other disease effects. The output then shows that this farm with 1,000 working sows loses around $500,000 a year, mainly in the fattening part and also in the breeding part. In the nursery part, it even has a benefit from the disease, but overall there is a loss, and the benefit occurs because you have less piglet, which are in the nursery part. And we then can also allocate the costs of the disease into different parts. So, for example, I've increased labor costs, increased veterinary costs, but for example, you also have, of course, much lower feeding costs. But overall, this ends up with huge losses in revenue. Also, for the UK, we estimate that PRRS causes 3.5 pounds per pig market losses, or 80 pounds per sow, and about 26 million on population level. So this example should just illustrate that we want to get in from one disease, we add the other diseases, and we end up for the entire animal health loss envelope. So we want to apply this uniform GBATS methodology to estimate the disease burden and to generate information for pork producers for better understanding where should we make investments and improved cost of production. And together with that, to have a better usage of data, to integrate data, and to have better data analysis for generating better information for optimized resource allocation. Thank you for your attention, and thanks to AHDB for financing this research project.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nick McIver, and I work for the company AM Walkup Building and Equipment Manufacturers. Even my colleagues are confused as to what I exactly do, but it comes under the heading generally of very little. But over the last few months, I have been spending time helping through the auspices of the Building Suppliers Forum to formulate a policy which we hope to persuade upcoming legislation to be based on sense. So first of all, I want to mention about the Building Suppliers Forum. It was formed under the wing of AHDB some years ago, initially to look into the causes of fires in pig buildings. The open discussions represented a unique level of cooperation between otherwise commercial operations. AHDB and the building suppliers felt that such cooperation was of ongoing value, and so still meet a minimum of twice per year to discuss pig industry issues. And the future of farrowing crates was always going to be high on our agenda. We regard it as probably the biggest seismic change since the banning of stalls and tethers at the turn of the 20th century. Just a little bit of history. During celebrations surrounding the unilateral UK ban of sow stalls and tethers, a published leaflet celebrating the victory had on the reverse a photograph of a sow in a farrowing crate, and below it was the strapline, "Gentlemen, our next target." Well, some 25 years later, and certainly in no way due to their efforts, they may well be due another celebration. This time, though, circumstances are different, and our industry is a very different animal. Well represented and with much more cohesive voice. Yes, I've got to admit it's smaller, but peopled with survivors of another 25 years of attrition. This time, the subject is the farrowing crate. We have watched here, both here and in Europe, the trialling of alternatives to it over a good number of years, and they've led to various results. At Walkups, indeed, we built and installed what would now be referred to as a temporary crating system at Farmers Weekly farms during the early 1990s. By comparison, there have been some spectacular failures, almost amusing in their failure. Does anybody remember the farrowing nest? Probably not. A combination of no restraint farrowing in a multi-suckling setting involving 10 sows and 1 stock woman, all including the stock woman on a permanent basis. But that is a bit of history. Where are we now? Well, all industries, we're well aware, are subject to massive pressures, although those pressures hopefully are finite. Our industry is no exception, and we could be forgiven for looking to the short term. Brexit has changed our position within Europe, but it has not removed the need to monitor compliance with the standards required by this local giant market in order to trade with it. The relatively small national herds in Sweden, Norway and Switzerland are already subject to bans on the use of farrowing crates. These small pig populations and a relatively high standard of living in each country has minimised the impact of these total bans. The EU as a whole are looking at the changes of the use of fixed crates in their rather slow way, but this has not prevented some members of the Union in setting their own programmes and alerted the UK to the dangers of being left behind in the welfare stakes. For many years we were able to exploit we've got to remember that for many years we were able to exploit the kudos from our unilateral removal of stalls and tethers under the high welfare standards banner. We must not allow the tables to be now turned upon us. The NPA were in early talks with DEFRA as to the implications of a ban on a fragile industry, and indicated that initially the preparation of impact assessments should lead to the publication of a consultation document for interested parties to comment on. Allegedly, one suggestion floating about in DEFRA was that as we already farrowed 40% of sows outdoors, it would be easy to turn that to 100%. One vital concession, though, on a more serious note, emerged that whilst free farrowing was still the aspiration, temporary crating would be allowed. This turned free farrowing, in effect, into free lactation, still with the opportunity, if so wished, to not close the crate at farrowing, if circumstances allowed. Early adopters of free lactation were already trialling and experiencing the realities of the system, motivated either by their basic beliefs or what was beginning to happen in Europe. Reports, fortunately, appear to be universally positive, with some even experimenting with leaving the crate open at farrowing, secure in the knowledge that they could close it if necessary. Following a DEFRA request to the NPA for information to help with their preparation of the proposed consultation, Zoe Davis asked the AHDB Inspired Building Suppliers Forum to help. She felt with their practical knowledge they could answer some of the questions and undertake real farm studies to highlight the practical problems of planning and implementation of such far-reaching changes. It was hoped that presentation of such studies based on a selection of situations would ultimately be faced by most farms, and that information based on experience and not dogma would carry weight with DEFRA, who must have been realising what a complex problem this could become. The forum have continued to play a supporting role through the NPA and AHDB in providing information and farm visits to DEFRA when required or when we felt it would be helpful. We've been quite careful, and I'm sure all bodies involved have been quite careful, to keep this as a friendly negotiation, all with the aim of ending up as a workable system. And so far, I have to report that I've received no evidence to the contrary that this is not going to happen. If nothing else, the on-farm studies highlighted the most important and potentially troublesome areas which we feel needed to be addressed. The first is planning. In many areas, the planning process has been virtually weaponized. As more extensive farrowing systems will require, in a large number of cases, extra buildings, it must be recognized that this requirement is brought about by changes in legislation and not an increase in activity. And a smooth planning process must follow. Anybody who's gone through the process will realise that impact assessments, the various reports required, studies and other hoops you have to jump through make the planning process slow and expensive. Planning appeals, if the first approach fails, are even more so, and refusals can be fatal to a business. The second area is financial help. This covers two subject areas. One is direct grants and the other one is tax breaks. In a food production area largely free of subsidy and almost permanently on a financial knife edge, never more so than at the moment, the need for help in financing whatever change requirement emerges is important. Theoretically, there are currently, or at least coming up in the next year, pathway grants under the Sustainable Farming Incentive, available, yes, in coming months, but lack of known standards and requirements prior to legislation or even consultation makes application even more of a lottery. Can you imagine the situation or the outcome if grant aid is given for facilities which subsequently prove to be non-compliant? We believe there is a need, when the time comes, for much more targeted help, specifically aimed at the improvement of farrowing facilities. In addition, although farrowing equipment already attracts capital allowances, I would strongly suggest that the new buildings or extra building works required by legislation change should do so likewise, and over and above any grant aid. Additionally, this type of help could well decide many who haven't already to replace marginal farrowing accommodation with new, more efficient buildings. Third and last, but by no means least, comes the issue of time. For obvious reasons, farrowing is right at the heart of the production cycle. It holds this position both metaphorically and actually. Replacement presents the largest, most complex problem it is possible to imagine in both production and financial impacts and subsequent financial implications. Implementation can take many times longer than a straightforward building project. In addition, the situation facing building and equipment suppliers must be taken into account. We know as a group, and history teaches us this, that the net result of a change on this scale in present-day circumstances, however sensitively handled, will result in a smaller industry. No supplier would contemplate expansion against the background of industry contraction. So therefore, the capacity to put these changes in place is, if anything, going to be static or even reduced. Sorry? Yeah. When I was originally asked to talk, I'd hoped there would be more or less, there's slightly less history and a little more progress. We at Walkups have designed our free lactation pen branded Farrowflex. There are other versions right round the hall. If anybody wants to discuss, there are many stands you can do it on. Thank you. Thanks very much. Those aren't mine.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming along. I am Jen Waters, the Head of Knowledge Exchange at AHDB, and I'm here to talk to you very briefly about the UK Pig Industry Welfare Training Platform. Around about 18 months ago, a number of different organisations collaborated to set up this training. You can see on the slide here, AHDB were part of it, Red Tractor, the Pig Health Welfare Council, NPA and the Pig Veterinary Society. Our primary aim was to demonstrate to the consumers and customers that the pig industry takes welfare really seriously, how incredibly important it is to us in order to help protect our reputation. We know that the vast majority of stock people that handle pigs and work with livestock do so with extreme care, but we want to be able to demonstrate this and to prove this, and also to help fill any knowledge gaps. The training that we've created is great for new entrants and provides an excellent reminder for experienced stock people. The module that we've launched focuses on the moving and handling of pigs. It's an online training course that takes around about an hour and a half to complete. There are videos and multiple choice questions, so it's designed to be engaging and help people learn whilst they're watching it. It was launched earlier this year, in the spring of this year, and we've already had 2,500 people sign up, which I just think is excellent for the take-up in the industry. I'm pleased to say that the feedback so far has been really positive, with a score of 4.8 out of 5, which is just excellent. We've got some feedback on the slide that you can see, but I think my favourite feedback that I've had so far was from someone that just said, quite simply, surprisingly good. Can't really compete with that. We've also had feedback from stock people that have 30 years experience coming away saying that they learned something as well, so that's really great. The training isn't intended to necessarily replace other training, but really to make sure that we bring everybody up to a minimum baseline level. And if you do have other training available that's maybe more practical, we would still encourage people to do that. The way that we've designed it as well, for those of you that have Pig Pro as part of the AHDB tool as part of your way to manage your training, this can link into Pig Pro as part of the compliance function, which can be used for your assurance. The training is mandatory for Red Tractor, so anybody working on a farm that works with the pigs, that moves the pigs, has to complete this training. And if you want to know a bit more information about Pig Pro and how we can get it all to link together, I'll be on the stand afterwards with a couple of my colleagues, and we're quite happy to talk you through that. Due to the challenges that we're facing in the pig industry at the moment, AHDB are offering this training for free up until the 31st of August, or until 8,000 users have signed up. 2,500 on it at the moment, so there's still plenty of time, but make sure that you make the most of it whilst you can. We look forward to investigating whether future modules are something that would be of interest to the industry as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Jen, thanks everybody, thanks to all our speakers. We've got just a couple of minutes if there are any questions. There's a roving mic if you'd like to indicate if you have a question. I can't see any, but so I'm going to ask one. Mandy, great progress with antibiotic use across the UK over the last few years. Obviously, the pressures that producers have been under for the last 8 or 9 months with their difficulties in shifting pigs off to the abattoir. Lots of people have been worried about what that would do to average antibiotic use. Have you got any information on what impact has happened?
Thanks, Mike. Yes, we, as people will know, we collate antibiotic use on an annual figure, and we're just putting the finishing touches to the 2021 data. So all the data came in the first couple of months of 2022. We've spent time cleansing it. A large team back at AHDB, not a large team, but a few people doing a lot of work there at AHDB to cleanse that data. And like you, Mike, we were quite concerned with the backlog of pigs on farms, that was going to have an impact on their health, increased stocking density, maybe antibiotic use had gone up. I can't give you the figures today, but to say that it is a good news story, it doesn't look as though antibiotic use has gone up. We're hoping to announce a reduction in antibiotic use in 2021, which I think is tantamount to the efforts of producers and their vets and the efforts that they've made to ensure that disease status doesn't decrease during the times that we've had of high stocking density and pressures on farms. So I'm really delighted. I wasn't expecting it, but I think it's a really good news story.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. I think that's right. If producers have managed to protect the health and welfare of their animals under the circumstances that they've been enduring for the last few months, I think that is an absolutely incredible achievement. And the fact that we're able to demonstrate it with data is extremely valuable to those who have an interest in how we produce our pork. We don't have any more time, so I'm going to wrap this session up. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you to our speakers who will be available.